recording. And so just so that you all know, if you turn off your cameras so that your name appears, when it records, it's black, it's blank. We can't see who you are, or we can't see that you've even attended this meeting. So just for your own knowledge, you won't show up in the video. And what I want to do now is I'd like to introduce all of the people that are on this call. And we have some guests here with us today, which I'm super excited about. But on this call with us here today, we've got Polly Beschenstein and Laura Moore, who are lower school and middle school therapists. We've got our fearless leader, Adam Rohde, who I'm seeing in the middle of my screen there. We've got Chris Winters and Rick Colombo from the high school. And I know we've got Marshall Spooner from the middle school, but I don't see Flynn Corson at the moment.
He's running late. He's going to try to hop on.
Okay. And my understanding is that there might be some internet difficulties as well. And then we have our two guest speakers today. We've got David Kutcher in the high school and Lindsay Wall from the middle school. And they're both learning specialists, learning support specialists that we have here at Country Day. And what we wanted to do today was gear this discussion slightly different and more towards an executive functioning piece. And by that, what we mean are those skills that you guys are hearing about and talking about all the time that are really based on time management, planning, organization, sustained attention, goal-directed persistence, staying on task, avoiding distractions, all of those executive functioning pieces that are, as we know, developmentally not fully developed in our kids. In fact, we know that really for females, it's about 20, 21 years old until they're fully developed. And men, I won't say how old for us, but definitely older than 21. For some of us, they may still be developing. And I'll just speak for myself on that one. So from this executive functioning standpoint and what we're dealing with, Rick Colombo agrees with me. I just wanted to get that on tape, Rick, so that when it's recorded, we know that you agreed.
Well, I'm saying I'm in the same boat. I don't agree that you have any issues. I'm just saying that I clearly have them.
So in terms of this executive functioning, what I'd love to have a discussion today with all of you about is, what is the impact that we're seeing with our executive functioning during this remote learning? How is it getting impacted? What's being impacted? I would love to hear from parents on what's working at home, what's not working, what have you tried and has been awesome, and what have you tried that's been miserable? And when you have these two learning specialists on with us, we have this great opportunity to talk to them about what are some other strategies you might be suggesting to your children at home during this time. And the only other piece I'm going to add on to this, and then I'm going to turn it over for a second to Adam to see if he has anything just to kick us off with. But from an emotional standpoint, we know that the prefrontal gets overwhelmed when we're emotional. And if the prefrontal gets overwhelmed when we're emotional, or we're frustrated, or we're anxious, or we're fatigued, our ability to think well, or our ability to use executive functioning strategies gets impacted. And so if during this time we may have some stress, and I can't imagine why we might have some stress at this time, there's also a good chance that that is having a secondary impact on our children's executive functioning skills. So I'd love to take this opportunity today to talk about that combination of executive functioning and social emotional functioning. And with that, Adam, I just thought I'd turn it over to you for a few seconds.
Sure. And for those of you who remember Anthony Bose, who's now in Switzerland, I had a conversation with him this morning at 7 a.m. our time. And he made sure to let me know that for the past 35 days, it's been sunny and 70 in Zurich. And it was, there couldn't have been a more depressing statement that he could make. And so as we look outside the door in our 5th week of remote learning, and while it's 45 and rainy, I look forward to these chances to talk with all of you and to have our mental health team and our educational resource folks on the call, because we're trying to make sure that we're taking care of kids in terms of their learning, but also their social emotional well-being. So I look forward to this and a chance to do this. And on the last call, Polly did a great job of sort of just giving a 100,000-foot flyover of what executive functioning is, if that's a term that is new to anybody. And if people need that, I'm sure she could do that again. And I know David could certainly do that as well. So wherever you want to start from there, Jeff, ready to go.
Sure. I mean, Polly, do you want to give a little 2-minute recap of your great overview from the last one?
Sure, I'd be happy to, but I also want to make sure, David and Lindsay, who really are the experts for middle and upper, chime in. All I did the last time around was really just talk about really executive functioning in a very broad way, talking about how it's really just the higher order cognitive skills that develop across a lifespan, the set of processes that have to do with managing oneself and resources in order to achieve a specific goal. I love the analogy to executive functioning in the brain to sort of the air traffic control people, the people that work and hold and focus on a lot of different information to filter distractions and switching gears at a busy airport to manage those arrivals and departures. I love that analogy. Many of you have probably heard that before. What I chose to do is really just boil it down to sort of 5 different venues to look at: organization planning, paying attention, managing emotions, starting tasks and staying focused on them, and keeping track of what you're up to and what you should be doing. Really looking at it in 3 different umbrellas: working memory, which many of you have heard the term before, but if you haven't, really it's just a way that the brain takes in information and applies it in some way. I use the example of a student doing some reading in a book, how they take in that information and then are able to then answer questions. Socially, how do they take turns in different group activities? Another umbrella that I love is that flexible thinking, cognitive flexibility, sort of the ability to think in more than one way, perspective taking, how can they solve math problems in different ways. And then the third umbrella, just that self-control piece, the ability to ignore distractions and resist temptations. We see this all the time in kids that are kind of jumping out of their skin, wanting to answer questions in the classroom. So how do we help them with that regulation piece? As Jeff mentioned, executive functioning skills are really developed in that prefrontal cortex, in that frontal lobe, and it takes time. So we see it in the primary years in a lot of regulation aspects, and then obviously in middle and upper, and David and Lindsay, it'd be great to hear kind of what you're seeing and what you're grappling with remote learning specifically in those ways. David?
Yep,
Yeah, chime in.
Thanks, Polly. First of all, I concur with everything you said in terms of executive functions. Exactly on target. The only piece that I often have and work with parents and even students, they'll come in and they'll say, well, executive functioning is organization. And that's what executive functioning is. And while I don't disagree with that, organization never, ever helps me. And since my job becomes how do I support or remediate or guide a conversation about organization, I try and drill down pretty fast. Are we talking about your backpack, which has too many papers in it, which might in fact be organization of physical pieces of paper? Or are we talking more about organization, prioritization, which is the first thing that you've got to do, the second thing, the third thing? Or are we talking about organization when it comes to metacognition? I have a paper that's due and the teacher wants the thesis tomorrow, but I don't know what the thesis is yet. How would I get there? And so that is where I'm seeing the manifestation most in 9th through 12th graders, is that there was, in face-to-face learning, there's a far less room for the procrastination side of things. Because while you will have a teacher who on Google Classroom posts on Monday may post on Friday there is a test, or on Friday the project is due. What happens on a day-to-day basis when you are actually going to those classes is that the teacher's able to check in with you. And so a student who misprioritizes on Monday night finds out on Tuesday, oh, this is the night I was supposed to make flashcards. This is the night that I should have reached out to the other members of my group to put together that piece of research. And now what often is happening is that it's not Tuesday or Wednesday, but it's Thursday with the due date of Friday that a student is learning something like that, or a student is recognizing, perhaps I should say, something like that. And so that's where I'm finding the greatest challenge is students who in face-to-face learning and day-to-day learning were able to use the teachers and get feedback, some kind of feedback in the next class, aren't getting that as quickly as they need. And so those students who are falling behind reach out to me, and then we've got to quickly scramble to come up with something, or they're reaching out to their teachers. And in some ways it's great learning, it's great education, because it is forcing 9th through 12th graders to have to take a little bit more ownership on, and then you can fill in the blank, whether it is self-advocacy or it is learning how to juggle, learning how to manage your schedule, learning how to break things down and work with yourself and a group. For other students whose executive function development is not quite there, and or ownership is not quite there, it becomes a little lesson first and foremost in finger pointing. Well, the teacher didn't tell me, and my class didn't tell me. And then it becomes needing an adult to help them scaffold. But those are the pieces that I'm seeing the most, is that in the remote learning world, students who needed adults to help them manage their time really need adults to help them manage their time. In the remote learning world, students who procrastinate, in the face-to-face world, students who procrastinate really need adults to help them say, on a day-to-day basis, here's what you need to do. I'm going to check in with you in a half hour or an hour, and then come back and check in again in a half hour or an hour. And that type of thing is my work primarily has become in those few areas as I'm supporting students.
I think that was a great overview from Polly and from David. And I would just add, from the middle school perspective, remote learning has been very interesting to just watch unfold. For some students, it's proven to be extremely challenging in terms of their executive functions. But on the other hand, we have seen the flip side of it. We've seen a lot of students that are thriving through remote learning, and a lot of students who in the past struggled with their executive functioning. They're actually responding well to this with fewer transitions. I think it's also really empowered our teachers to build in terms of their professional development and to ensure they're being extremely clear with their expectations and with their work. And again, we're growing each day as we continue to practice remote learning, and we're learning from the students and their needs. And again, as the educators, trying to improve to make this as successful as we can for the children. And I just would add that all of this is extremely individualized. So I think this is a great forum just to brainstorm ideas, and what's working for one child or one family may just spark an idea for you to try in your household too.
So I'm going to put on my glasses for a second. I see that we don't have any chats yet, but I got an email earlier that I'm going to read. But I need my glasses now, so forgive me for 1 second. So it says, my main question for today is around the importance of routine/schedules. Being confined to our house, our sense of structure is completely dissolved. Our children are fairly independent. Every one of them wakes up at different times every day because their classes start at different times. Everyone has lunch, or they can make it for themselves. We always have dinner as a family, and we do the dishes. Then everyone goes their separate ways to do homework, and bedtimes vary between 10 to midnight, depending on the kids and their homework load. Other than that, we have no daily routine. One daughter, let's see, I'm trying to leave out information. One daughter is very self-sufficient, makes her own routines and sticks to them. The other one has a to-do list, but gets easily distracted and derailed, and never goes to bed before midnight. even if we put them to bed and turn off the lights, as soon as we as parents are asleep, they wake up and fiddle around doing Lord knows what until midnight or 1 a.m. So I'm putting that out to our team. Any thoughts on creating and enforcing a schedule, providing a framework of routine around meals, or letting them do their own thing? Can we force them to go outside? Would love to hear your feedback.
I'll just add one thing about the bedtime thing. I've given up on the fight with the oldest one on bedtime. I just think it's a losing battle, and the circadian rhythms are different, and shutting off the lights and screaming at them at 11, it just doesn't solve for it. And so as long as they're waking up and they're doing their thing on the front end, I'm not sure if it's worth the battle on the back end with the oldest one, if I'm thinking about who that might be. You know, I have a younger one who he needs a bedtime, and so we're on that with the younger one. But if you got a 16, 17, 18-year-old at this point, I'm not sure you're winning that. The 2 o'clock isn't, it sounds outrageous to us. It's not so outrageous to where they are. The question is, as long as they can get up at 10 a.m. the next morning, if that's when their first class is.
I would echo what Adam is saying too. There was a great article, again, we talked about Child Mind Institute. They put out some great articles and emails. And one of them was just trying to get the larger picture, was specifically about screen time, but I think it applies to what we're talking about here. It's this idea of this is a moment in time. We're all doing things, breaking sort of rules, bending rules, being more flexible than maybe we would normally be. And then just trying to take a look at the larger picture. So like Adam is saying, yes, the older ones, the bedtime is probably a losing thing where you're going to end up losing more sleep than they do. So, you know, on any one night, maybe they're going to bed way too late. But if you're looking sort of at their week, are they getting enough sleep so they can get up and do their work? Are they basically eating well? Are they basically getting exercise? Are you having some quality time, whatever definition you have, with your family? Are they spending some time with their friends? Are they completing their homework and their work? And if the answer to most of those things is yes, you know, then you're doing a darn good job, and your family is really going to come out of this in a great position. And if we kind of focus in on those horrible days that we all have in any one of those things, it's probably not going to set a great environment in your house, and not to mention your own mind.
I'm just going to chime in and say, pick your battles. I have 2 teenagers as well, and I try and remind myself sleep is not one. I'm in bed a lot earlier than they are.
David or Lindsay?
The only piece that I think I would add is that I am discovering with some of my students, and this echoes what Lindsay said earlier, that some of my students have capabilities that they didn't even know that they had in the face-to-face learning world. And so where they had adults to scaffold their go outside and play sports time because it's 3:45 now and it's time to practice sports or to go to a game, show up here and have your jazz band lesson now because now is the time that happens. Come to the lunchroom because now it's time to eat lunch. What students are sometimes discovering is that they don't like to eat lunch at 12 o'clock. Instead, their body rhythm brings them to a 1 o'clock or a 2 o'clock time for lunch. And if you've got a household where that is not so important, that could be great. I have some students who have to study first thing in the morning because that's the way that they retain information. I have other students who like to stay up late and they are able to retain information. And so in some ways, I'm discovering students who can get work done and still, but I find that they are actually not in line with the way that others in their household do so. And that creates some friction sometimes, but when I guide my students and their families to that, they seem to be okay with that idea.
I would just agree with what David said. We're seeing this with the older children in the middle school also. I think the older they get, the later they are staying up, but I think it's having that honest conversation in your household and talking to your children and asking them, are you genuinely more productive if you are waking up later, if you're working later? And again, it's all about the honesty. And there may be times they're really tired and then not as successful in their work, and that's something to discuss and make adjustments for. But again, I think we're trying to leave room with our asynchronous classes for that reason. We're trying to be flexible with the different styles of learners and open that up and allowing children the choice. And again, this whole process and remote learning is opening us up to that beautiful opportunity, allowing students to really be more reflective and think about themselves and to consider, when are they most productive? What time of day? How will they manage their time? So again, just trying to pull out some of the silver lining that we can here.
So Lindsay, you completely stole my thunder, like stole it. That was great. And Polly, you stole it too. Pick our battles. We have to pick our battles. And, you know, with what Lindsay's referring to here is this discussion with your child is such a wonderful opportunity to ask those questions, right? And how are you most successful? What time of day do you work best? What's working for you? What's not working for you? The opportunity to ask these questions is going to, you know, give them the opportunity to give you the answers that you can use as fuel to help restructure their schedule. So using this opportunity, I think is something that you can't look past. And so I encourage you to have those conversations as often as you can, but then be able to listen. So if you're going to have the conversation, don't have it to just get your point across. Have it to really listen to what they're going to tell you, and then use it in a way that can help them structure their time. And so, you know, I think, again, Lindsay, that's so important. If we can use that in our discussions with our children and they can actually guide their own change, that's even better. All right, I have a question in here that was sent to me privately, and I'm going to read it.
Jeff, may I just add one quick
Yeah,
piece?
please.
Thank you. One of the other pieces that I do with students when I work with them to try and put some time and structure around their days, the first thing that I ask them is, what is fun for you? What is a brain break for you? And there are often times where a student will share with me their brain break is fill in the blank, something that involves screen time, something that involves Netflix, something that involves just sleeping. And it doesn't resonate for me. You know, playing a video game doesn't resonate for me at all. That is not fun. But I listen to the student and I have them build that into their brain break time so that they are able to have their voice and their decision making on that, even though it doesn't resonate for me. And I'm discovering I have a lot of students who don't want screen time at the moment, which is great to hear. But I do have some students who do, and they want to be in front of their phone. They want to take some time and fill in the blank, Snapchat or play video games or what have you. But as long as that's built into their world and I'm honoring that that's what brings them pleasure, that's what allows their brain to relax too, it works. And I see that resonate in my household. One of the things that I have going on now at all times is a puzzle. And I have two people in my household who hate puzzles. They don't understand the purpose of a puzzle because they look at it and they say, why would I spend time with that? I know what the picture looks like. On my side of it, it relaxes my brain. I'm able to turn off everything. And so what brings me 15 minutes of brain break between two classes is not something that resonates for others, but I have people in my world who respect me enough to let me go and do that.
Thank you. Here's the next comment in the chat. It says, I think David Kutcher is right about needing to check in. What's the best way for me to get a handle on what assignments are due and when I can check in? I'd love to find out what the teacher's expectations are for homework and put it on a calendar for visual learning. This is for an upper school student freshman. Usually we're hands off because of a freshman, he needs to take ownership, but now that we're at home, we need to step in a little. So I don't know if that's for you, David, or for Chris, or.
I'm happy to speak to it. There are a couple of ways of doing it. I see that Kathy Steele reported the Google Classroom reports are good. You can ask all of the teachers to list you as a guardian on the Google Classrooms. And what it does is it sends you actually have to set this in your own settings. It can send you a daily or a weekly email that will tell you what your student was, or what your child was assigned either on that day or for the course of that week. It comes with a couple of challenges, I will say. One of the challenges, if I am a teacher who on Monday just puts in a document that says all of your homework is listed on this document, and I've put that in there as an assignment, here's all of your homework between now and Friday, and now I'm putting on the other hat of saying I'm the parent, you'll get an email on Monday that says your child didn't hand this in. You'll get an email on Tuesday saying your child didn't hand this in. On Friday, you'll get an email that says that your child submitted all of that work. And some teachers do use it that way. The other piece that can be challenging is it might just say project due on Friday, but you don't know that on Monday, the child is supposed to work with their group to research some kind of policy that has happened in a historic pandemic. And on Tuesday, they're supposed to come up with their own potential policy. And on Wednesday, they need the counter argument because it's not broken down that way. So I'm purposely speaking about this because it's not a foolproof system. At the end of the day, the only foolproof system is for you to create something with your child and say, there's a project due on Friday. What are you doing tonight to build towards that? There's a test on Friday in geometry. What are you doing tonight on Tuesday to build towards that? And that I have found that's what I have to do with my students. And sometimes I have to tell them, this is what you might do. The study guide, this is what you might do. Review your homework from the past few days. But that's what I'm finding, and that's how I'm setting up my check-ins with all of the students with whom I work.
And you can also always reach out to the advisor as well. If you have a concern about what's going on, a quick email or a quick phone call to the advisor will get everything up and running. The advisor will check in with the teachers and get back to you on what's going on in your child's life right now.
Okay, thank you. So this one goes back to the last discussion. It says, agree with pick your battle, but what about the 12-year-old? At what age do we say they don't need the structure? 12 feels young. Thoughts on that?
I agree, 12 feels young. I think 12-year-old needs structure, bedtime, screen limitations. And I got a 12 and a 17-year-old. And as I said, 17 feels like it's okay and 12 not so much. Interestingly, my 12-year-old is much more organized than the 17-year-old, but that's a side note.
And then I'll just jump on here to respond to that. Also, again, I agree with that. I think the 12-year-olds definitely need a little more structure. There's some one-off individual cases, again, where the child may work better at certain hours, and we try to be a little bit flexible with that. But from the get-go with remote learning, we shared out the remote learning schedule, and we've found that it's been really important and helpful for children to follow that specific schedule, even on days they have asynchronous classes. When it says A period, it's really important for those kids to know the structure and the routine. The routine is they're meant to be logging onto their Google Classroom page for that classroom so they can check their assignment sheet, see exactly what they're supposed to be doing. The other beauty of that is that the teachers are always generally available during that time. So even if it's an asynchronous class, the teacher should be available if the child has any questions. We also have structured built-in breaks for snack, for lunch. So again, I do think that structure has been really helpful for some of the younger ones, specifically in the middle school.
If I could jump in just a moment, and this does kind of go back to that previous conversation. As a parent, I know it's very hard to let go when your child doesn't follow the kind of schedule that you want your child to follow. That's the battle for me on a regular basis. I also know that as an adult, I'm constantly adjusting my routines and schedules. I'm thinking about systems that work and systems that don't work and how to adjust those. And a lot of times that's in conversation, with my wife or with my colleagues at work, or just internally with myself. And what I really think benefits at the high school level, I agree 12 is still pretty young, but at the high school where they're 14, to 18, really trying to get them to think about some of the choices that they're making, but ultimately they have to make the choice. So if they say, I can't go to sleep at night until 2 a.m., you might say, well, let's try 3 days where there's no screen available in your room after 11. And let's see if it makes a difference. If it makes no difference, okay, maybe you just can't go to bed till 2. But I'm all into having them experiment and be sort of develop an awareness of things that they're doing that are impacting their ability to do things they know are probably in their best interest. And that's, it comes with another question here from Patty Stark, which is, how do you get them to stick to their schedule? They got to have a schedule, and then they have to keep going back to it and saying, what's working, what's not, how do I adjust the schedule? Because writing it out once 5 weeks ago before remote learning and not going back to it isn't going to benefit the kid.
Yeah. You know, with changing a schedule or changing a habit, there's all these different, 10,000 repetitions, or is it 6 weeks? So I challenge all of you today to go into your room and take out your socks and put them on your bed, and take out your t-shirts and put them on your bed, and put your socks in your t-shirt drawer and put your shirts in your sock drawer. And tomorrow morning when you wake up and you go to grab some socks, I guarantee you're going to find t-shirts, right? And so in order to change a habit, we have to do it over and over and over and over again. And there will be failures. You will open up your sock drawer and find t-shirts. That's a failure. That's okay. We learn from that. But it requires repetition to do it over and over and over again.
And Jeff, I'm just going to chime in, and because I tend to take somewhat of a behaviorist approach at times, encourage your kids when you see them doing the right thing, right? Accentuate the positive, right? Great job today. Loved how you rocked all the things that were on your schedule. Awesome. Might not happen each day, but when you can really appreciate the good, they'll tend to do it over and over again.
Yeah, well said. Very well said. I see we have a lot of messages. I think I have some that were sent to me privately. So
Yeah.
let me read a couple of these, and then we'll get back to the ones that were sent to everyone. This says, with 2 teens in our house in online classes, it's been proven to us that they learn best from 10 a.m. on. Their circadian rhythms have taken over, and it's working well for them. So that was a comment. Let me just scroll down here a little bit more, Polly, to see. The next one I see is from Kathy. Do you see that? Or is that the one that Chris read off?
I think he read that.
Okay.
Maureen, maybe?
The next one was sent to me privately. It says, can you please address the screen time limits and how to address in this current environment? Are normal time limits still appropriate, or given the need for social interaction, relax limits as long as work is getting done? What is healthy? ? Do you want to start with the APA piece, Polly, that you always bring up?
Sure. I just have been highlighting in the different weekly opportunities where these questions come up that the APA really kind of pulled back on the recommended screen time that they've had, knowing that people were going to be inside and on screens an awful lot more. So I think they stepped back their restrictions and their limitations and just took them off altogether so that parents wouldn't be kind of micromanaging the time.
And I think it's really helpful to take a look at what kind of time they're spending with the screens. So the games that are very social in nature, I think are sort of the games that we're saying it might be the right time to relax some of those rules. I don't mean that they're playing 20 hours a day, but that social piece, they're craving it so much. And especially some of our boys, this is how they relate to each other, even without COVID-19. But taking a look at whether they're just on their phone by themselves playing a game that has no social piece to it. I think those 2 things are important to try to differentiate.
Yep.
A couple of things that I've noted is I've got some, and in some ways this is also responding to what Capuchin asked a moment ago. I have a couple of students who go running together, but they go running together with their phones in front of them. And they are FaceTiming and jogging, or FaceTiming and walking together. I've got a couple of students who are doing dance routines together. So there's this social that is coupled with screen. And I'm not saying that that's the right answer. I'm saying that it is an answer that is getting them a moment of brain break, a moment of connection. And as Polly said a moment ago, or Laura said a moment ago, different games, different interactions, even if they have screens in front of them, can create a connection that may not be something that as an adult we look at and say, oh yeah, I want to do that. That sounds great. But for our students, it actually may be the perfect connection in this moment, because it's not about biology or geometry, but it's this opportunity to do something that is silly, but has a small exercise component, a small movement component, and a social component. So those are the types of things that I've been encouraging my students to do. I even have one student who only joins advisory if she can be outside on her phone. And I said, sure, that sounds great, as long as you join. And there she is on the phone, often running down her street, and great. So things like that. It is what Laura and Polly said a moment ago. It's revisiting what the rules are, and in some ways making a brand new playbook.
Polly, did I miss one here on Maureen V?
No, I don't think we've addressed that yet.
Okay. Want me to read it? You want to read it?
Whichever. I got it.
Okay.
EF is not our son's favorite skill to work on. Prior to the pandemic, we awarded him with gaming time if he successfully utilized EF skills during his week as an incentive to encourage our son to work on those skills. The problem we face now is that I feel that since gaming is now a big part of his socialization, I don't know if it's right to take that away, if this is the time to do that. But at the same time, he needs to work on these skills. Do you have any other suggestions for incentives other than cash? I want to avoid using money as an incentive. How about 14?
I'll just say, I mean, with that, I do think maybe having a set baseline of time built into your day. It could be a short amount of time where he knows he will be allowed to game for the social aspect of it. But then maybe you can build in that buffer where he can still earn some additional time based on the fact if he's accomplishing what you've set out. But again, I think it comes back to revisiting it with him and being honest with him and just talking about what other things interest you. I think it would be important to see if there can also be other outlets for him or ways to pique an interest at this point, whether it's trying something new, getting involved with music of some kind. But I think a healthy balance might be nice to spark here too, and to explore something new.
On my end, the first thing is always the individual. And so as Adam said earlier, some 12-year-olds need a bedtime, and some 12-year-olds may in fact have better prioritization ability than a 17-year-old. So that's first and foremost. But then after that, I kind of err on the side of what is, and I've said this earlier, so I'm repeating myself, but what is the primary job? If your primary job is to be awake by 8:30 tomorrow morning and in front of the Zoom and be prepared for that and get all of your homework done and participate in the projects that have been assigned, and then you now have this free available time between 1 p.m. and 9 p.m., how are you using that time? And if you are getting your primary job done and you are getting all of your work fulfilled, this is an opportunity, and this is where I would probably lean on the 14-year-old to say, you are being responsible. Your job as a 14-year-old is to get all of your schoolwork done. And as long as that is happening and you are using the time that you need to meet with your groups and meet with your teachers, let's visit the rest of the time that you have available. What are your responsibilities? Being on time for dinner, perhaps. And then after that, if the child wants to go to bed at 11 o'clock and that's working, the child wants a little bit more gaming time and that's working, great. But as soon as the grades are slipping, homework isn't being turned in, that's the moment for adult intervention to say, clearly, you can't manage all of this time and you need a little bit of help and guidance. And so the help and guidance might be, you don't get gaming time. The help and guidance might be, okay, classes are over now and it is 12:15. You need a break, go do something fun, and I'm going to check in with you at 2 o'clock. And from 2 to 4, you're going to focus on getting work done. And after all is said and done, it is just an individual endeavor for each kid. And that's what I step away with.
I totally agree. I'll just add that this is still a process for so many of our kids. This is not easy for a lot of kids who've got some EF challenges. And if you're seeing progress here and you're choosing the things that you want to measure that week, did he do this or did he do that? Maybe that is partially what you can tie the increased gaming time to, especially the social gaming, because I hear what you're saying. That is a tough one to take away. But again, I wouldn't be aiming for perfection at this point, but certainly progressing well, especially for kids with EF challenges.
So I would say one of the things I work on with kids is always be a little bit better today than I was yesterday, right? And so if we can just keep that in mind, I want to be a little bit better today than I was yesterday. And last week I talked about motivation and, you know, what causes motivation. And we know that there are external motivators and there are internal motivators. So external motivators are the cash. Cash is great. Let me know. I'll come to your house. Maybe I'll do the errands for you if you want. Be glad to come and help. But there are other external motivators, and it could be social time. That could actually be social time on the video games could be an external motivator, right? It could be other things that they want to earn that they have to earn over time with doing things every single day over many days. It could be putting ideas into a family jar that you pick out every Sunday, and those are activities that they really want to do. So there's different external motivators, and then there's internal motivators. The problem with external motivators, before I get into internal, is that they wear out. You know, any of us who've ever made a behavioral chart and done a reward system for those behavioral charts, they work great for a couple days, maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks, then they seem to fall apart. It's because they don't hold the same level of motivation. Internal motivators are based on successes. How successful do we feel? And if we have little tiny successes day after day after day after day that get rewarded, like Polly was talking about with her positive reinforcement, those become internalized and those become a better habit. So if there are little successes that you can reinforce over every single day, and we can move towards that internal motivation. And I always tell my high school kids, think like an ant. You know, and I said this last week too, think like an ant. Go in, ants go in, they grab the piece of dirt, they walk out, they drop the piece of dirt. They walk back in, they grab a piece of dirt, they walk out, they drop a piece of dirt. And I've stolen that idea from a guy by the name of James Clear, who wrote Atomic Habits. All right, a very, very good book if you want to learn about changing habits. And it's super important to think about those in those little baby steps. So I'm going to be a little bit better today than I was yesterday. I
So
lost
along
track of
those lines, Jeff, the next question actually is about motivation, but motivation in terms of getting a child to exercise. Question mark. How many kids are attending the school-sponsored fitness classes?
Yeah, I can answer that. There was I just asked Tim Helstein. He said it's been fluctuating from a high of around 33 to a low of around 8. But it's been kind of going up and down each day.
So today alone, I've had 3 conversations with 3 different high school kids about exercise and the importance of exercise. And what I didn't say was you need to exercise. What I did ask was, are you exercising? And then I asked, what have you noticed when you haven't? And what have you noticed when you have? And do you find any difference between the two? And it's surprising how easily they come up with their own answer. And I didn't even have to say anything. I just had to ask the right questions. So I think for a lot of these things, it's sitting down and asking the right questions. You can, of course, say you have to. I don't know how long that's going to last or what reward system you're going to use. I think sitting, again, like Lindsay said earlier, sitting with your children and asking them these questions and engaging them in their own answers without you even having to say it, you just end up in a better place at the end of the conversation.
Like there's a follow-up to that as to whether kids could be incentivized to attend those classes in some way, participate in 5 classes and get 5 points added to your work grades at the end of the week or something like that. Good idea.
I'm going to leave that. I'm going to put that back to Chris and to.
I don't think Chris would want to wear pants. I don't think that split 5 pairs of pants is going to get her out there.
Points.
Oh, worst grade. I was kind of questioning what the worst grade was. Yeah, I don't like to mix external incentives with academic grades. Academic grades should reflect mastery of content and mastery of the work. But if, you know, one of the adults could have a conversation with Bliss and we can nudge her in the right direction, I think that's, you know, it's also interesting to me watching, you know, why do kids like video games so much? They tend to be things that give you a measurable output that you try to beat the next time. And it sucks you in. And why do people like to ride on Peloton, for example? Because it gives you a score at the end of a ride and you try to beat that score. You know, I think Will Turner up at the upper school is phenomenal at this, helping kids track their fitness, know how they did, set a goal. I mean, even Dr. Tesso there, he's got a goal that he shares with me with his biking, and he reports back to me after each ride if he got close to his goal, and that makes him get on the bike in the morning. So
I'll put up a T-shirt for any kid who, if you set some kind of, we'll give some GCDS swag. How about that? So if you want to set some number, you attend 10 workouts, you get the swag. I'm happy to send that out.
I would also just add, we've heard some of this come up in the middle school. I would also strongly suggest reaching out to your child's advisor. If this is a problem, it's just good for it to be on the advisor's radar. And sometimes they can be really helpful too, whether it's helping to set them up with a social connection or a buddy. Sometimes the peers are motivating to each other to get them involved in certain things and activities like this.
The only piece that I want to add, and I think that I wind up maybe being a little bit counter to some of the other items that have been said already, is I wholeheartedly agree with the sit down with your child and come up with the game plan, come up with what is it that you want to achieve. So when you sit down with your child and say, let's talk about the week. What do you want to do on Monday night for the test that's on Friday? Be prepared for the answer, nothing. The test is on Friday. And be comfortable with that. And let's use that in this week, especially back to Jeff's aunt example. Use that this week to see how that works. So if in fact on Friday the kid takes the test and the kid aces the test, you may have a kid who's unbelievably successful and great at cramming. Perfect. But if in fact at the end of the week on Thursday the kid is anxious and the test comes on Friday and the test is not as successful as you want, now you can enter the world of next week, how are you going to be a different aunt? And what will be different? And that for me has been probably my greatest, I've given away my 2 great secrets as a learning coach. Number 1 is first and foremost, identifying what is fun and programming that in first. Number 2, identifying with the kid what the kid finds themselves to be successful at and letting them use that as their process and then pivoting from that process. So those are the 2 pieces I would just encourage you to spend time with your child on and build it week over week over week, because that's how the aunt definitely changes behavior.
I'm looking at the time and I'm seeing that we've got about 8 minutes. A lot of us have to jump off and go on to other calls. I had one other chat here that was sent to me that I'd like to read and go through maybe some responses to that. I encourage all of you though to read through some of the other responses because some other parents made some really good comments and I think they'd be worth reading. But let me read this one to you and see if we can get some feedback on this. It says, although our kids think that watching Netflix, being on social media, or playing a video game relaxes them, I don't see them self-regulating well. And therefore, minutes can easily turn into hours. It feels like you can easily get to a place where their desire to relax with a screen overtakes them and they start pushing back or withdrawing from being with family or being active. How do we balance this? Anybody want to jump in on that one? Well, I'll jump. My first thought is it doesn't relax them. And so that's a false notion. So you're actually stimulating the brain. So every time you go to your computer or you go to your phone and you're getting that stimulation, you are activating the brain. It is not helping you relax. In fact, it is leaving you more deficient in certain brain chemicals that you need. So when, I've gone around to the high school classes and they've heard me talk about this, and I've actually explained to them how it's counterintuitive. It doesn't really relax them. It feels to them like a security blanket. And so just because it feels like a security blanket doesn't mean that it acts like a security blanket. And so the high school kids have all heard this. And so I would say that what we need to do is have more conversations with them about what are better ways to actually relax. Would it be going outside and shooting hoops? Would it be doing some physical exercise? Would it be stretching? Would it be doing some breathing techniques? Would it be do you like coloring? What helps that's not actively stimulating to the brain? I don't know if my colleagues have any thoughts on that.
I love what you have to say, Jeff, and I also sometimes find that to be a hard sell for a kid who does feel like, at the very least, that is their social connection. And so I usually, or at least when the empirical science doesn't actually work, I try and pivot to something along the lines of creating a balance. And this is where I talk about adults acting as the frontal lobe for the child. And so if in fact you have a child, at some point it has to all stem from a child identifying and saying something isn't getting done that is causing me challenge or stress or a poor grade or conflict at home or conflict at school. And the moment that I can identify that, that allows me to kind of edge in with the child to say, can we prioritize differently? Can you give me a half hour on math and then take a half hour on your social media? Can you give me a half hour on reading and then take a half hour on this? And I've put together schedules with kids that literally have them pivot from place to place to place. And for some kids that works, and some kids need an adult to remind them. But then after that happens, I can do a debrief and say, does having either your parent off of your back or your teacher off of your back help alleviate some of that stress? And that's where I go with some of my students. And Jeff, no doubt, with some students, you really can kind of show them the brain and show them the dopamine and serotonin and how that affects relaxation and how that affects longer term sleep, and that can work as well.
If I could just, not to that topic, but I want to share very quickly, anecdotally, how 15 10th graders responded to a poem written by Amanda Gorman, who's the poet laureate. And then the question was, what advice would they give their peers? And to a person, they articulated resilience and the ability to let go of things that are outside of their control, to find the positive, the silver linings in this whole quarantine situation. It was inspiring to me to hear how well kids are managing, even if it looks like they aren't managing as well as they are. So I think there's a lot to be positive about, and I really appreciated it.
Thank you, Chris. I think that's the perfect note to end on. I appreciate that. So I just want to take a second and thank our administration for being on this call, and of course our mental health team with Polly and Laura. And I really want to thank Lindsay and David for joining us today, and of course our fearless leader, Adam. And thank you all for being here today, and we will see you all next week. Bye, everyone.